On Sunday, March 22, 2026, Peter Obi visited Kaduna State as part of his nationwide political consultations ahead of 2027. He was hosted by Sheikh Ahmad Tijjani Umar, a respected Islamic cleric with deep roots in Kaduna's religious and civic community. It appeared to be a routine political engagement, a presidential aspirant consulting with community leaders, normal democratic activity. Then, 2 days later, Peter Obi went on X and dropped a statement that set Nigerian political Twitter on fire. I have just been made aware that revered religious leader Sheikh Ahmad Tijjani Umar has been arrested by authorities shortly after hosting me in Kaduna. Within hours, the story had been shared tens of thousands of times. The narrative was clear: a religious leader arrested for the crime of hosting an opposition politician, democracy under attack, the government silencing dissent. But then, Sheikh Umar himself appeared in a video that directly contradicted the arrested framing. In his own words, "I am speaking today to correct a false report being circulated in some quarters. I was not detained by the DSS. I was invited for questioning. I cooperated fully and I was released. I am free, I am safe, and I am well." He urged his supporters not to create disorder in the name of loyalty and made a pointed reference to former Kaduna Governor Nasir El-Rufai, urging patience and due process in that separate matter. What Peter Obi claimed. On Tuesday morning, March 24, 2026, Peter Obi posted a statement on his verified X account titled "Troubling Developments in Our Polity That Must Be Nipped in the Bud." He revealed that Sheikh Ahmad Tijjani Umar, an Islamic cleric who had hosted him in Kaduna 2 days earlier, had been arrested by authorities. Obi described the timing as deeply troubling, framing it as evidence that freedom of speech and movement in Nigeria was under threat. He warned that citizens and perceived political opponents were facing harassment and unnecessary persecution. He called on those in power to apply the rule of law and stop undermining Nigeria's already fragile democracy. Obi did not specify which security agency was responsible for the arrest. He did not state the charges. He did not say whether he had spoken directly with the cleric or was relying on second-hand information. These are important details, and their absence matters. The twist: what Sheikh Umar actually said. Hours after Obi's post circulated widely, Sheikh Ahmad Tijjani Umar appeared in a video that directly contradicted the arrested framing. In his own words, "I am speaking today to correct a false report being circulated in some quarters. I was not detained by the DSS. I was invited for questioning. I cooperated fully and I was released. I am free, I am safe, and I am well." He urged his supporters not to create disorder in the name of loyalty and made a pointed reference to former Kaduna Governor Nasir El-Rufai, urging patience and due process in that separate matter.
The distinction that changes everything. In Nigerian legal and security practice and in international human rights frameworks, there is a meaningful difference between an arrest and an invitation for questioning. An arrest involves formal detention, charges, and custody. An invitation for questioning is a voluntary or administrative engagement that does not carry the same legal weight or civil liberties implications. Whether what happened to Sheikh Umar constitutes an arrest, a detention, or an invitation is not a semantic question. It is the analytical question at the heart of this entire story. Why this story matters beyond the facts. Even if Sheikh Umar was only invited for questioning, the question of why he was invited, by which agency, and on what grounds remains politically significant. The timing, 2 days after hosting Peter Obi, during Obi's active political tour of the North, is either a coincidence, a warning signal, or a manufactured narrative. All three possibilities carry serious implications, and this channel is going to examine all three. Sheikh Umar made a specific reference to former Kaduna Governor Nasir El-Rufai, urging supporters to be patient and allow due process in that matter. Why did the cleric link his own situation to El-Rufai? What is the connection between this cleric, Peter Obi's visit, and the El-Rufai political dynamic in Kaduna? We will return to this. Peter Obi's statement did not name the arresting agency. He did not confirm he spoke directly with the cleric before posting. This raises a precise question. Was Obi's statement based on verified information, or was it a political communication decision made on incomplete facts? We will assess that question with evidence. The security architecture in Kaduna. Kaduna State sits at one of Nigeria's most complex security and political intersections. It is a state with a significant history of religious tension between Christian and Muslim communities, a legacy of political contestation between former Governor Nasir El-Rufai and the current Governor Obasani, both of the APC, and active DSS, police, and military presence linked to ongoing counter-terrorism operations in the northwest. Any security engagement with a prominent Islamic cleric in Kaduna must be understood within this context, not simply as a political event, but as an institutional action with potential security and community dimensions. The DSS and invitations for questioning. The Department of State Services, the DSS, has a documented history in Nigeria of using invitations for questioning as a tool that occupies a legal gray zone between formal arrest and informal surveillance. Prominent critics of the government, journalists, civil society actors, and opposition-aligned figures have been invited for questioning at DSS offices where they are sometimes held for hours or days without formal charges before being released. Sheikh Umar's statement that he was invited, cooperated fully, and was released is consistent with this pattern and does not automatically mean the engagement was benign or politically neutral. The legal framework. Under the Nigerian Constitution, Section 35 guarantees every person the right to personal liberty and specifies that no person shall be deprived of such liberty except in cases defined by law. An invitation for questioning that is functionally coercive, where a person attends under implicit threat of formal arrest if they decline, can constitute a de facto deprivation of liberty even without formal detention. The courts have addressed this in several cases. The distinction between invited and arrested is not always as clean as it sounds when the inviting party is a state security agency with the power to convert an invitation into a detention at any moment.
Sheikh Umar's video statement contains a detail that has been almost completely ignored in media coverage. He did not simply say he was not arrested. He specifically mentioned Nasir El-Rufai by name, urging his followers to allow due process in El-Rufai's matter. El-Rufai is currently facing a separate political and legal battle involving the Kaduna state government. Sheikh Umar is known to be within El-Rufai's political and social orbit. This means the DSS invitation may not have been primarily about Obi's visit at all. It may have been about the cleric's connections to El-Rufai and the Kaduna political situation. Obi's framing collapsed a potentially multi-layered security engagement into a single politically convenient narrative. 3 possible explanations, assessed honestly. AFRONewsHQ does not deal in speculation. We deal in frameworks. There are 3 analytically coherent explanations for what happened in Kaduna, and they carry different political implications. 1. The government used the cleric's hosting of Obi as a pretext. Under this explanation, the DSS invited Sheikh Umar specifically because of his association with Peter Obi, sending a chilling message to religious and community leaders across the north that hosting opposition politicians carries personal risk. This is the explanation that Obi's framing supports. It is consistent with a pattern of documented incidents in which individuals perceived as sympathetic to opposition political activity face security attention. And it is also the explanation that is hardest to verify definitively, because security agencies do not announce their real motivations. 2. The invitation was related to El-Rufai, not Obi. Under this explanation, Sheikh Umar was invited for questioning in connection with his proximity to former Governor El-Rufai and the ongoing political and legal tensions in Kaduna State. And the timing of Obi's visit was genuinely coincidental. The cleric's own reference to El-Rufai in his response video supports this reading. If this is accurate, then Obi's statement, published without directly verifying the reason for the invitation, misattributed a pre-existing security engagement to his political tour. 3. Obi made a calculated political communication decision. Under this explanation, Obi was informed that the cleric had been contacted by security services and made a deliberate decision to frame it publicly as an arrest linked to his visit, knowing that the framing would serve his 2027 political narrative about government suppression of the opposition. This does not require Obi to have fabricated anything. It requires only that he communicated incomplete information in the most politically advantageous framing available. This is a common political communication practice, and it is distinct from lying, but it has analytical implications for how his future claims should be evaluated. Who benefits from each version of this story? If explanation 1 is true, Obi benefits, the government is damaged, and the chilling effect on northern community leaders who might otherwise engage with the opposition becomes a documented pattern of democratic erosion. If explanation 2 is true, it becomes a cautionary example of how political communication can flatten a complex institutional situation into a simple narrative that serves a predetermined conclusion. If explanation 3 is true, it reveals something important about how Obi's 2027 campaign will be conducted and raises legitimate questions about the reliability of his public statements as a source of factual reporting. The honest analytical position is this: we do not have sufficient verified information to choose definitively between these 3 explanations. What we can do, and what we are doing now, is refuse to collapse all 3 into one. The 2027 strategic dimension. This incident lands in the middle of Obi's active northern political tour, which included his Kano meeting with Kwankwaso, his Katsina condolence visit, and now his Kaduna engagement with Sheikh Umar. The arrest narrative, whether fully accurate or partially constructed, serves a specific strategic purpose for his campaign. It positions him as a democratic martyr figure whose mere presence constitutes a threat to those in power, and it sends a signal to northern religious and community leaders that choosing to engage with him is an act of political courage. That is a powerful narrative, regardless of whether the underlying facts fully support it. Peter Obi stated that he was not the one who made the information public initially. He said he was made aware early this morning. This means someone in his political network fed him the information before Sheikh Umar's own video statement emerged. The question of who fed Obi the information and whether they described it as an arrest, knowing that word would be maximally politically impactful, is the unexamined thread in this story. Information operations in Nigerian politics are sophisticated. This channel does not rule out the possibility that Obi was himself a victim of incomplete or politically shaped intelligence from within his own network. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything. The chilling effect. Real, regardless of which version is true. Here is the national implication that holds regardless of which explanation is accurate. Whether Sheikh Umar was formally arrested, administratively invited, or contacted for unrelated reasons, the public perception created by Peter Obi's statement is that hosting an opposition politician in Nigeria in 2026 carries personal security risk. That perception, widely shared, rapidly amplified, and not yet authoritatively contradicted by any government statement will influence the behavior of community leaders, religious figures, and civil society actors across the North. That influence is real. It is a chilling effect, and a chilling effect does not require an actual arrest to function. The pattern of silence from authorities. As of the time of this script, no official statement has been issued by the DSS, the Kaduna State Police Command, or any federal security agency explaining why Sheikh Umar was invited, what questions were put to him, and on what legal basis the invitation was issued. That silence is itself an institutional failure. In a functional democracy, security agencies that engage with prominent religious leaders during an active political season owe the public a transparent account of the legal basis for that engagement. The absence of such an account, whether or not the engagement was appropriate, fuels exactly the kind of suspicion that Obi's statement generated. Religious leaders and political space. Sheikh Ahmad Tijjani Umar is described as known for speaking on governance, youth engagement, and national accountability. He sits within a category of northern Nigerian religious leaders who occupy a unique space, simultaneously pastoral, civic, and politically influential. The securitization of that space, whether through formal arrest, informal invitation, or simply the threat of either, has consequences that extend beyond individual cases. It shapes who speaks, who stays silent, and who decides that political neutrality is safer than political engagement. In a country where religious leaders are among the most trusted voices in their communities, that shaping is consequential for democratic participation. Does this strengthen or weaken Nigerian democracy? The process weakens it. The transparency failure deepens the damage. Whether or not the DSS acted appropriately in inviting Sheikh Umar, the absence of official explanation combined with the scale of public concern generated by Obi's statement represents a failure of institutional communication that erodes public trust in security agencies. Democracies are weakened not only by actual abuses, but by the opacity that makes actual abuses indistinguishable from legitimate security operations. The democratic backsliding narrative. International democracy monitoring organizations, including Freedom House, the U.S. State Department's annual Human Rights Report, and the EU's election observation missions, have documented a pattern of shrinking civic and political space in Nigeria since 2019. The Sheikh Umar incident, framed as it was by a prominent opposition presidential aspirant, will enter the documentation of that pattern. The Tinubu administration's failure to issue a prompt, transparent explanation of the security engagement makes it harder to contest that framing internationally. The US and UK dimension. The US Embassy and the British High Commission in Abuja both have active democracy and governance monitoring mandates. Incidents that appear to show security agencies targeting opposition-aligned individuals, particularly religious figures, attract diplomatic attention and private representations even when they do not produce public statements. The Tinubu administration's diplomatic relationships with Washington and London are important for debt restructuring negotiations, security cooperation, and bilateral investment frameworks. Reputational damage from documented democratic backsliding has a cost in those relationships, even if that cost is diffuse and long-term rather than immediate. The Diaspora signal. Nigerian diaspora communities in the United Kingdom and the United States are among the most politically engaged external audiences for this story. Many of them supported Peter Obi's 2023 campaign and remain active in opposition political networks. The Sheikh Umar story, as it was initially framed, will reinforce Diaspora conviction that the Nigerian government is prepared to use security agencies against political opponents. The subsequent clarification from the cleric himself will reach a smaller and less emotionally engaged audience. The initial narrative will do more durable work than the correction, which is a lesson about how political communication and democratic accountability interact in the social media era. The strongest case for Obi's framing. Let me be clear. This channel does not take sides, it takes evidence. And the case for taking Obi's concerns seriously is substantial. Even if Sheikh Umar was only invited for questioning, the invitation came from a state security apparatus 2 days after the cleric hosted an opposition presidential aspirant during an active political campaign tour. The Nigerian DSS has a documented and judicially recognized history of using informal invitations as tools of political pressure. The absence of any official explanation makes it impossible to rule out political motivation, and Obi's framing, while potentially outrunning the verified facts, reflects a genuine and documented pattern of security sector behavior that Nigerians have experienced across multiple administrations. Dismissing his concern as political theater would be as analytically dishonest as accepting his framing uncritically. Misconceptions in circulation. 1. Sheikh Umar was arrested and is in custody. This is false. The cleric himself stated clearly on video that he was not arrested, not detained by the DSS, was only invited for questioning, cooperated fully, and was released. He described himself free, safe, and well. 2. The government confirmed the arrest was political. No government agency has confirmed anything. No official statement has been issued on the reasons for the invitation or the agency that issued it. The government's silence is a problem, but silence is not confirmation. 3. Peter Obi fabricated the story. This is also false. Obi said he was made aware of the situation. He did not claim to be an eyewitness. He acted on information provided to him and communicated it publicly. The question is not whether he lied, it is whether he communicated incomplete information in a politically maximally framing and whether he sought independent verification before publishing a statement with significant democratic implications. That is a question about journalistic and political standards, not about fabrication. The most analytically significant sentence in Sheikh Umar's response video is the one that received the least media attention, his reference to Nasir El-Rufai and a call for patience regarding the matter concerning our leader. El-Rufai and the Kaduna political scene are in active flux, with ongoing disputes between the former governor and current state and federal actors. If Sheikh Umar's invitation was connected to the El-Rufai situation, then the entire Obi arrest narrative was a misread, not a fabrication, but a misattribution of a complex security engagement to a simpler political cause. That distinction matters enormously for how we assess both the government's conduct and Obi's communication standards. Most likely next moves. Peter Obi will continue framing security agency engagements with individuals in his political network as evidence of government suppression, regardless of whether individual cases are confirmed as arrests. This is a deliberate 2027 campaign narrative that positions him as a democratic martyr and signals to potential supporters that the government is afraid of his candidacy. The Sheikh Umar incident, even with its clarification, will remain part of that narrative because the initial framing has done its work on social media. The Tinubu administration will continue to say nothing, which is the most politically comfortable response in the short term and the most damaging to institutional credibility in the medium term. The administration's failure to explain what its security agencies are doing and why is a recurring pattern that strengthens opposition narratives, even when the underlying facts do not fully support them. The DSS will maintain institutional silence, consistent with its standard operating practice. The DSS does not comment publicly on operational matters as a rule. That rule, whatever its legitimate security justification, makes it structurally impossible to distinguish between appropriate operations and political intimidation from the outside. Sheikh Umar has already managed the situation with significant political dexterity, correcting the record, urging calm, and avoiding any framing that could be used to escalate tensions between his community and either political camp. His reference to El-Rufai suggests he is navigating a complex set of loyalties and pressures that are larger than the Obi visit. Signals to watch. Whether any official statement is issued by a security agency explaining the basis for Sheikh Umar's invitation, whether similar engagements are reported with other community or religious leaders following meetings with Obi or other opposition figures, whether Obi acknowledges the cleric's own clarification in any subsequent statement or continues to reference the incident as an arrest, whether international democracy monitors formally document the incident, and whether the El-Rufai dimension of this story receives any serious investigative journalism attention.
Sheikh Umar's reference to El-Rufai in his clarification video suggests his invitation may have been connected to the ongoing Kaduna political situation involving the former governor, not to Obi's visit. The cleric is known to operate within El-Rufai's social and political orbit. If this connection is the actual basis for the DSS invitation, it means Obi's statement misattributed a pre-existing security engagement to his own political tour. That does not make the underlying concern about DSS behavior invalid, but it significantly changes the factual foundation of the story, as Obi told it. Obi's statement acknowledged he was made aware rather than claiming direct knowledge. This means his public communication was based on second-hand information, and he published it without specifying the source, without naming the arresting agency, and without indicating that he had sought Sheikh Umar's own account before going public. As a presidential aspirant, Obi's communications carry significant public weight. The Sheikh Umar incident is therefore also a test of the information standards he will apply in the most powerful office in the country. Supporters will say he acted in good faith on alarming information. Critics will say he acted without adequate verification on politically convenient information. Both assessments have merit. We began with a story. A religious leader arrested after hosting Peter Obi. A democracy under threat. An opposition politician crying out on social media. Then, the same religious leader appeared on video and said, "I was not arrested. I was invited. I cooperated. I am free." So which story is true? The honest answer, the one this channel is built to give, is that we do not yet have enough verified information to say definitively. What we have are three competing explanations: a government that will not explain itself, an opposition politician who communicated before verifying, and a cleric who navigated the situation with more political skill than either of them. But here is what we do know. In a healthy democracy, you do not need to choose between these explanations because the government tells you the truth. Security agencies explain their actions. Arrests are documented. Invitations are disclosed. The basis for any security engagement with a prominent religious figure during an active political season is transparent enough to assess. Nigeria does not yet have that transparency. And in the absence of transparency, the worst interpretation always fills the vacuum because it has been true often enough to be credible. That is the real story. Not whether Sheikh Umar was arrested or invited, but why Nigeria is a country where the difference between the two is impossible to verify, and why that impossibility is the most dangerous thing in this entire episode. You now know something that most Nigerians watching the news today do not know. What you do with it is up to you. Share it, debate it, challenge it. That is how democracies survive. AfroNewsHQ, Nigeria deserves better analysis. See you in the next one.